Okay, so I'm going to come and talk to you more from the completely opposite end of the spectrum. I'm going to start talking about the sort of design aspects of pyromusical shows. So I'll just tell you a little bit about me quickly first. I'm a director of Signing Fireworks, and I also run a company called Lumitech Systems where I write software for firing systems and for designing shows, and that software is used by companies all around the world. We've got a lot of companies in America that use it and things like that. I've worked with sort of electrical firing systems. I started doing fireworks sort of when I was about 16, 17, doing shows. And because I started at school, I did a lot with sort of manual push-button systems. And then when I went to university, I actually built our first digital system. And I've got a few things over here. So the far end is our sort of manual push-button thing that I designed when I was at school. And then I've got our first digital system. And now this is the system that we use currently. So if you want to have a little look at that lot, you can feel free to have a little look. So these are really my thoughts on pyromusical show design. There's no real right or wrong answer. Some people like different styles of shows. Some people like to do things in certain ways. And certainly from the design point of view, a lot of it's a personal choice on how you like to do things. So I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts, how I like to approach things, how I think things work well, and hopefully if you're involved in shows or designing it or looking at shows, hopefully it might help you with that as well. So why pyromusical shows? Well, I've always thought it's a kind of a natural progression of fireworks. Your traditional firework displays got so far, and then people started introducing music, and I think the sort of pyromusical was a natural progression. And I like to think that when we're designing shows, the music adds this extra dimension where you're creating an emotional connection with the people in the audience, because it's not just the visual fireworks, it's actually the music. And music is very emotional, and you combine that with the fireworks, and it adds that extra dimension. And these are the type of comments that I'm looking for from people when people watch our shows. I want them to say, "Oh, that was amazing. It was, brought a tear to my eye," or something like, whether it's a wedding or a November 5th show. I'm really aiming to sort of really create something different and exciting that they'll enjoy. So, like I say, music gives us this kind of extra dimension that you can play with when doing a show. So this is one of my little pet hates, is the difference between fireworks with music and fireworks to music. So I'd like to say, fireworks with music playing in the background. So that's, for me, I don't feel that's a pyromusical. I think that's just, you play some music and you let some fireworks off with it. I would say, if you're going to say, if you're thinking of fireworks to music, I'd like to think of fireworks dancing to the music, and that's what I feel a pyromusical is. I'm sure other people have other opinions, but that's what I think. And I always think if you go to a West End musical and people weren't dancing in time to the music, it wouldn't really be a musical. It wouldn't particularly be very good. So you can do some, very good shows, just with the music and the fireworks. But for real pyromusical, real excitement, the fireworks have got to really interact with the music. And again, I'm sure that some people might not agree, but that's my thoughts anyway. So choosing the music, not all music lends itself to fireworks. And sometimes when clients come to us and say, "Oh, we want a pyromusical show and we want to use this piece of music," and you look at it and go, "Oh, you're having a laugh, aren't you?" Because you need music with hooks in it, with quiet parts, loud parts. A lot of modern music can be very samey. It can be the same all the way through, and it doesn't give you any scope for changing the types of fireworks or the size, the volume of it as it goes through. So choosing the music is very, very important. So you've got sort of classical, you've got modern music, and then you've got classics, so older tracks, but things that people know and people enjoy. And so for example, when I'm designing November shows, I try and get a bit of everything in there, because classical does have a really good presence, and it does work quite well with fireworks. And also modern music, people like it because they know what's coming next, and they go, "I know this track, and this is really good." And then the sort of classics, things like Great Balls of Fire, things like that. There's tracks like that people really enjoy, and it's quite fun. So when I'm doing a November show, I try and do a bit of everything, unless the clients, other shows where the clients are being more prescriptive. And known versus unknown music. I did a show years ago, and somebody came up to me afterwards, and one of the things that really struck them was they really enjoyed one of the pieces of music where they knew what was coming next, because the anticipation of what was coming next actually heightened their excitement of, oh, this is going to be good, because I know, a bit further down this track, it's going to be really loud and impressive. And that was something that I hadn't really thought about before. I'd just been picking tracks that I thought worked really well, and I wasn't really bothered about whether people knew them or not. I just thought they worked well with the fireworks. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And also, knowing your audience, what type of establishment is it, the approximate age of the audience, they're all important factors when I'm designing a show. I'm trying to think about who's watching it, what they're going to like, what they're not going to like. And also, trying to get something for everybody, because, if you do all heavy metal and it's a primary school, then it might not go down quite as well as if you had something a bit more modern or, different. But having different stuff in there, works quite well. So, editing the music tracks, I don't like to just get the tracks and just stick them end to end and say, there you go, I'm going to design it against that. Because I think often tracks can be too long, and if you shorten them down, you can keep it interesting, you can keep switching between the different styles potentially. So I think editing the music down is actually a really important part of designing a Pyromusical, and it's often overlooked by people when they're doing a show. So editing the music allows you to cut out repetitive parts of the tracks if you need to. You can lengthen or shorten segments, and you can allow space in between the tracks if you feel that you want to have, if people are going to applaud after a certain bit. If you do a particular bit that builds up quite nicely and you want to leave a little gap, it can encourage people to applaud. And sometimes you just want to get them end to end so they mix fairly seamlessly together. We're quite lucky in that one of my crew is a sound engineer and a DJ, and he does a lot of our music editing for him. So I tend to give it to him, give him my thoughts, and we sit down and chop and change things around a little bit. So, but I feel it works. It works well, and you don't, especially when you're cutting down the length of the track, because, like I say, often a whole track is just a little bit too long. So, people have really got to remember that it's a Pyromusical, so the music is really important, and not just the choice of the tracks or how you edit it, but every part of the music. What the source content was. Is it MP? If you've got an MP3 that you got off your mate, or if you've got a decent quality rip off a CD, how you're going to play that audio back. All the aspects are very important, and quite often Pyromusicals, the music is kind of. The firework people are really into the fireworks, but the music is just music. We've just put some tracks together and that's it, and it's often overlooked. So, one of the things we do at Sonning is we make sure that all aspects of the music are well thought about. So, Pyro Theatre. This is a word we use internally. It's just I thought I'd bring it up, but it's some of the shows where we have like a narrative or something that kind of links the whole show together, we've coined this term Pyro Theatre, because it's basically got a bit more theatrical elements. There's bits where there's no fireworks at all, and it's just something we coin internally, and I thought I'd just throw that out there because you might want to use it as well. So you've designed the show, and you've got your music and everything else, and you need to work out what's stock. One thing we do is we film every single show we do, even if it's just on a little camcorder. We film everything on the basis that we can go back and we can look at products and we can lift the times off. We can see, how loud, how quiet they are, and it really helps me when I'm designing the show to be able to, quite often I'll get a video up, get the piece of music, and at the right time I hit play on the video, and yeah, that works. That doesn't. It's the right length. It's too long, too short. But one thing you must be careful about is if you're testing, if you're recording products, videos of products, or you're testing them, that you try and keep them from the same batch or similar batches, because we all know one year you might have something that's 20 seconds and the next year it's 40 seconds, or even worse, previous year it was 40 seconds and now it's 20 seconds, which catches you out, and it's no fun when that happens. So like I say, don't rely on the previous year's videos. What I tend to do is if I've got big Pyromusicals coming up that I know I need to really nail, I often use the products in smaller shows early on, so I can make sure that we've got videos and that the products are going to be suitable for the show. So from a design point of view, when you're designing a show, when I'm designing a show, I've got to consider the space that I'm putting it in. You know, how wide's the site? You know, how deep is it? And where the fireworks are going to sit in that part of in that space that we've got to fire it in. And also the perspective, you know, because if you've got your shells miles back and your cakes really far forward, the perspective will mean that those things could foul in the air. But if you push the cakes back, then you have the cakes below the shells, and it can look a lot nicer. So the perspective can be quite important as well. You know, I look at the firework noise and the type of noise and the level of the noise and how well that fits in with the music or not. Because there's no point in having a nice quiet piece of the music and then having a stonking cake that's going really loud, because it kind of it doesn't really fit with the flow of the music. I often think that actually having a firework, you know, say you've got a cake and it finishes just as the music goes quiet, is actually more impressive than one potentially starting at the right time, because certainly probably from more you know, firework person's point of view, that when, you know, making sure that it stops at the right time is far more tricky than actually just starting it at the right time. But I always feel, you know, when you've got a nice piece of music, it's nice and loud, and then all the fireworks drop away and the music drops away. I always feel that's quite satisfying when I see that in a show. One of the things I also do is when I was at university, I did a degree in computer science, and we did a module on virtual reality. And back then, one of the things, the concepts they taught us was that with virtual reality, you could, if you had a system that could track the retina, so where you're actually where your eyes are looking, you could render the part of the screen you're looking at in a higher resolution than the bit around, because your peripheral vision's quite blurry. So you don't have to have really high quality video around, but the bit in the middle you could be really high definition. And I thought when I was designing the show, I was thinking, how does that work with the firework display? You know, when people are watching a show, where are they looking? Often they're looking in the middle. They're not going to stand there and look at the edge of the show. They're going to be looking in the middle of the show. So a lot of our shows are very wide, you know, over hundreds of meters, and we have, you know, lots of cakes across the front. So quite often what I'll do is if I want a whole front of cakes, and, you know, say we were using, you know, 20, 25 shot cakes, and I've put 2 at each position. Quite often on the outside positions, I'll just have 1 and then have more in the middle. So it actually kind of draws you into the middle. You've still got the width and the impression of it being wide, but you can't look at that whole thing at once, and often people are looking in the middle of the thing. So it just helps reduce a bit of cost if you can move some cakes from the outside of the outside parts of the show, but you still get that width and the impression. The other thing I do sometimes, if I've got a cake that's, say, 20 seconds long and I've got a 30-second piece of music, I'll overlap the cakes. I'll start some at the beginning and then some sort of 10 seconds in, so that that whole section has the right product going through it, and that can be quite helpful when you don't have a cake that fits the time exactly right. Because I'm very keen to make sure that the products we've got will fit in the sections of music, because overlapping and overrun can be just messy and not particularly aesthetically pleasing to my mind. And also, some people are sort of worried about having, you know, black sky or quieter effects, smaller things, but actually it can really lead to anticipation of what's coming. You've got to be careful, you know, if you've got a really loud, rousing piece of music and you have nothing going on, it's going to feel like a bit of an awkward pause. But certainly on intros or tracks, having smaller, quieter effects, or sometimes nothing at all on intros can work quite well, as long as when the actual track sort of kicks in, you've got something that then comes in, so it's obvious that it's not a mistake. And often fake finales during the show, you know, you can build up to a point and have something that's bigger than what they've seen before, have a little pause. Quite often you'll find people who will applaud, and then the next track kicks in, and as long as your main finale is bigger than fake finales, it works quite well. You don't want to have a big finale in the middle, and at the end it's just like, oh, that was rubbish. So I always find the finale has to obviously be the finale. The people at the end, they've got to look there and go, oh, wow, that's just unbelievable. If they're not, then, you know, it's not ideal. One of the other things when I'm designing a show is I try not to, I think the next point is the same, I try not to have a single point of failure, because Fireworks being fireworks and firing systems being fireworks firing systems, things do go wrong. Igniters fail, fuses fail. If you have a 30-second piece and you've got one cake in the middle and that fails, you'll have 30 seconds of nothing, which looks horrible. So when I'm trying to design a show, I'll always try and multiply things up and across different firing modules as well. So if there's a fault on a particular module or there's an issue, you don't have this black sky thing going on, and that's saved my bacon a couple of times on shows where we've had a cake just not fire, and luckily it's been in a pair, or there's been something fairly soon after that's sorted it out. So yeah, I try and avoid situations where I have a single point of failure on the show. So when I'm designing a show, I like shows to be crisp. I like it to be clean. I don't like things to sort of overlap too much. I like it to be very precise, where you go from an effect to another effect, and obviously that ties into the music. The music dictates when the effects should change and what they should be. Like I say, no unintentional overlapping. Symmetry I always find quite important, but equally, if you do something that's not symmetrical, I find if you repeat that sequence on the other side, it kind of makes the point that you haven't done it by accident. And that may be me looking at it from more of a firework critical point of view. But if you've got something over here and you've got single shots that are going dong dong dong, then fairly soon after, I quite like to do this, repeat the same thing on the other side, dong dong dong, to show that actually that was correct and there wasn't supposed to be something there. So I do try and keep everything symmetrical where possible. And then if I don't have things for symmetrical, I try and repeat on opposite sides to sort of make the point that it was on purpose. But again, that might be me analysing things too much, but I think symmetry is quite pleasing for people generally. So yeah, I've kind of said this already, but matching the firework intensity with the music. So also, if it's a big rousing piece and you've got a fast firing cake, that works. That works well. If you've got a slower piece of music, then a slower firing cake, or if you've got a quiet piece, then a quiet cake or shells or whatever. I always aim for the finale, so I always have in mind that even as a pyromusical, I like to have the progression through, starting from smaller and slowly getting bigger and bigger as we go through. I think every show has to be a crescendo. Years ago, I did some pyromusicals where the tracks ended quite nice and softly, and I popped a load of sort of horsetail shells, and they're all coming down, and it's all very lovely. But people are sitting there thinking, "Is it finished?" I'm not sure it's finished. Whereas if you have a thunderous finale and everything bang, 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 and it finishes, that's quite clearly the end of the show. So I do try and when I'm picking the music or making putting the tracks in the right order, I do always try and make sure that this is a constant crescendo, and I'm always thinking about, well, if I put 6 cakes in a row here, what am I going to do in the next track, which is the finale cake? Well, maybe that needs 4 cakes and the finale needs 6, for example. So I'm always aiming for the end game, which is the finale. And again, I've said about using using black sky and quiet effects to good effect, but also I try and design the show so that I can avoid that, like I was saying earlier, so not having a single igniter point of failure and things like that. And again, preventing overrun, because the last thing you want is this great big finale, and it's like, oh, that's brilliant, the music finishes, and then you've got this little cake going pop, 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 because again, it just looks messy and people are unsure of what's going on. I mean, I was chatting to a guy a while ago that does a lot of pyromusical shows, and he says in the last minute of his shows he will not use any cakes, he'll only use single shot effects, because then he can guarantee 100% that the show will not overrun. I don't tend to do a minute, but certainly the last sort of 30 seconds I do try and keep everything on single shots and things that I can control very precisely. And again, when I'm designing the show, I'm also thinking about how the crew are going to set this up, because there's no point designing this elaborate, complicated show and then not having the time or the crew to actually put it in, or making it so that when they get on site, the racks that we've got aren't going to work. So I've always got one eye on how these things are going to be laid out and how the crew are actually going to set it up. Otherwise, I get shot when we get on site. And also, I'm trying to design for an efficient setup. You know, if you've got, you know, all your mortar racks and you've got, you know, 6 tubes in a rack and you've only used 2, it's not necessarily hugely efficient. Whereas, yeah, so quite often I'm trying to consider how, you know, what hardware we've got on site, what I'm going to use, and again, there's no point taking extra hardware if you can either get away with less or rejig the show so that more things are in the same positions and you can use same racks and things like that. I spoke to Bill Davis, who judges at Plymouth and Southport and various other things, about like the judge's perspective on pyromusical shows when he's looking at the shows, judging them for the competition stuff. And he gave me a few points that I thought you might find interesting. He said, start with some really great music. Yep, fair enough. Avoid cringing gaps and overruns like the plague. So we've kind of spoke about that already. Work your sky when appropriate with rise and fall plus sweeps across can look so good. I just copied these out his email, which is why they're a bit like that. He said judges look for symmetry, hitting the beat and using novelty and colour. Mood and flow of the music and the fireworks and how they fit. And he's also saying if you use any sort of novel special effects, he said make sure they're relevant so that then you're not just using them for the sake of using them, they're actually fitting in with the music and they work well. So if you're going to use fireballs, then you know if you're doing a track like Great Balls of Fire, then that's great. But if you're using some quiet, moody piece and you stick a fireball in the middle of it, it's a bit pointless. But so I thought that was quite interesting from their point of view, judging competitions and things like that. So really, that's all I've got to say. If you want to ask me sort of questions later on, come and find me. If you want to look at some of our gear, that's cool, and that's me done.